Welcome, everybody. It's exciting times. Meeting number 101 from the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, December 13th, 2017, and Section 92 of the Copyright Act, we will be doing a statutory review of the Act. Before we get into it, I just have a few words that I'd like to do my preamble. So we are televised today. We thought it would be a good idea for the whole world to see us. You're on stage. It's my genuine pleasure to welcome you all to the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology's first meeting on the statutory review of the Copyright Act. The House of Commons honoured my colleagues and I when it entrusted the statutory review of the Act to the Industry Committee. Given the importance of copyright law in our modern economy and the lively arguments it generates, there's a special responsibility that comes with today's undertaking. This is a responsibility shared among both members of this committee and participants to the review. To all Canadians who care about the issues the community will examine, whether you submit a brief, appear as a witness in Ottawa, or meet us elsewhere in Canada, vous serez entendu. Vous avez toute notre...
You will be heard. You have all our attention. As chair of this committee, I'm committed to...
As we embark on what will certainly lead to difficult discussions, please remember that the role of the committee members is to ask all manners of questions to better understand the significance that copyright law has for Canada and its modern economy. Let us not presume the outcome of what will be a lengthy and fairly complex study. Let us always show respect to one another, no matter the different views we may hold on copyright. Let us aspire to a thoughtful and courteous conversation in true Canadian fashion. Conscious of the critical role our Copyright Act plays in our economy and its effect on the everyday life of Canadians, les membres de ce comité ont consacré...
The members of this committee have devoted many hours to prepare this review. The committee has decided to break it down into 3 phases.
In Phase 1, we will hear from witnesses involved in specific industries and sectors such as education, publishing, broadcasting, software, and visual arts. This phase will notably provide the opportunity for stakeholders to share concerns that are unique to these industries and sectors of activity. In Phase 2, we will hear from witnesses representing multiple industries and sectors. The committee looks forward to hearing from, among others, Indigenous communities and the Copyright Board during this phase. Finally, in Phase 3, we will hear from legal experts. The committee should expect bar associations, academics and lawyers appearing in their individual capacity to share their insight and knowledge to improve the Copyright Act to the benefit of all Canadians. As the House of Commons expects from this committee, we will review every aspect of the Act. We'll leave no stone unturned. You will all be heard. So I want to thank you in advance for participating in this nice long study, and we will begin. Today, we have with us from Universities Canada, Paul Davidson, President. We have from the Canadian Federation of Students, Charlotte Kiddell, Deputy Chairperson, and there it is. Move you back over here. Also with Universities Canada, we have Wendy Terrien, Director of Research and Policy, for the first panel. You have 5 minutes to present, and we will start with Mr. Davidson.
I'd like to thank the committee chair and members for having invited me to appear on behalf of Universities Canada. Our association represents 96 universities located in all 10 provinces whose teaching, learning and research activities are spread across all 3 territories as well.
Let me just echo the chair's remarks a moment ago, and on behalf of our members, thank you for undertaking this study. For those that have been on this study before, it is complex, it can be dry, it can be polarized, and it has big impact on the work of students and the work of researchers. Your efforts are vitally important to the more than 1 million young people studying at Canada's universities today, and those who will follow them. Your work is also vitally important to Canada's university researchers, who produce most of the copyrighted educational material used by university students. The university community brings a balanced perspective to this review as both owners and users of copyright material. Canada's future will be shaped in large measure by the education students receive today. Fair dealing for education ensures students across Canada have a diversity of learning materials, educational opportunities, and increased accessibility to post-secondary education. Digital materials mean that today, more than ever before, young people are equipped to achieve their potential, whether they live in Abbotsford or Attawapiskat. And that helps build a stronger, more prosperous Canada for all. In our rapidly changing world, Canada cannot afford to take a step backward in education. Maintaining fair dealing for education will help ensure Canada's young people continue to have the 21st education demanded in our changing world. As mentioned, the vast majority of learning materials used by students today come from creators on campus. University faculty, university professors are prolific creators in writing books and research papers. And one estimate is that academics, not literary authors, produce as much as 92% of the content available in university libraries. Copyright law needs to balance the interests of copyright owners and the users of copyright material. It should incentivize the creation of new ideas and allow for the dissemination of knowledge. Fair dealing is important for maintaining this balance. Compliance is also important, and that's why many universities have significantly increased their compliance efforts with offices staffed by lawyers, librarians, and copyright specialists to advise students, faculty, and staff on the use of copyrighted materials. Today, universities spend more than ever before purchasing content. According to StatsCan, university library acquisitions in 2016 exceeded $370 million, a figure that has been increasing year over year. In the past 3 years, universities have spent over $1 billion on library content. Libraries are also changing what they're buying. Our libraries have shifted from purchasing primarily print to digital content. One institution reports that in 2002, only 20% of their acquisitions were digital, but today this number has grown to 80%, and that trend will continue. It's important for this committee to know that unlike printed books, the use and reproduction of digital content can be negotiated and contracted. On campus, digital content is usually shared through links and not copied, and is frequently protected by digital locks. Further, Access Copyright's repertoire doesn't cover authors of born digital works and is restricted to authors of printed material. Along with digital content, most libraries now have e-reserve systems, making it easier for students to use library content on their personal devices 24/7. These systems are making printed course packs much less common than just a few years ago. Beyond digital disruption, a series of Supreme Court decisions guide the use of copyright material on campus. Before 2012, the Supreme Court of Canada said fair dealing is a right, and that's significant. In 2012, a series of decisions by the Supreme Court concluded that the right of fair dealing was much broader than how the education sector had been using it up to that point. And these judgments were the genesis for the shift in how the education sector has managed copyright. Since 2012, the courts have continued to expand our understanding of copyright law. A growing body of legal decisions are determining the details of what fair dealing means, and several active court cases are still pending. I would respectfully submit that Parliament should allow the courts to continue their work before intervening with more legislation. To conclude, it's true that parts of our cultural industries are struggling to adapt to the digital disruption affecting Canadian society. Canada's universities were pleased to participate in the 2016 review of Canadian cultural policy and to recommend new tools to support the creative economy. But changing fair dealing is not the answer to the challenges facing copyright owners during this period of transition. Changing fair dealing would have a direct impact on the affordability of education for students and the quality of the teaching materials at all levels. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. We wish you well in your deliberations. We welcome any questions you may have today or throughout the consultation process. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, and we're going to move right to Ms. Cadell from the Canadian Federation of Students.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for your invitation to present today. So as you said, my name is Charlotte Cadell, and I am the Deputy Chairperson of the Canadian Federation of Students. The Federation is Canada's largest and oldest national student organization, representing over 650,000 university and college students, including the 90,000 graduate student members of our National Graduate Caucus. This latter group are themselves educational content creators. The Federation has a mandate to advocate for a system of post-secondary education that is of high quality and is accessible to all Canada's learners. This includes advocating for our members' ability to access learning materials for the purposes of research and education in a way that is affordable and fair. Over the last several years, we've seen a shift initiated within the academic community to prioritize learning opportunities that allow for multiple points of access to information. Tired of predatory pricing from large corporate content owners, academics have increasingly opted towards models of providing content directly to the education community. These models include the use of open access journals and open educational resources. In fact, today, nearly half of all research publications in Canada are available online for free. Another essential facilitator of access to information are the current fair dealing provisions within the Copyright Act. Fair dealing, which has been affirmed by the Supreme Court as a central tenet of copyright law since 2004, allows for the limited use of copyright-protected works without payment or permission for the purposes of research and education. Such provisions allow educators to share brief video clips, news articles, or excerpts of a relevant text. Fair dealing has not resulted in the replacement of traditional learning materials, but rather allows educators to supplement these materials for a richer, more dynamic learning experience. The Supreme Court of Canada has repeatedly affirmed the role of copyright law in serving the public good. The ability of students to fairly access an array of research and educational materials is not only essential to the quality of post-secondary education they received, but to their ability to contribute to innovation and development in Canada. This government demonstrated its commitment to scientific development and innovation with substantial investment in fundamental sciences in Budget 2018. We would ask that the government uphold its commitment to research and development by protecting fair dealing. In recent months, students have heard myths perpetuated by private publishing stakeholders that students' advocacy for fair dealing is rooted in an unwillingness to adequately compensate content creators for their work. I wish to address these concerns in case they are shared by members of the committee today. First, let me affirm that students and their families have and continue to pay significant sums for learning materials. According to Statistics Canada, average household spending on textbooks in 2015 was $656 for university texts and $437 for college texts. Indeed, a report on the book publishing industry in 2014 finds educational titles to be one of the top 2 commercial categories in domestic book sales. Secondly, I will acknowledge that students do struggle to afford textbooks. A 2015 British Columbia study found that 54% of students reported not purchasing at least one required textbook because of cost. 27% took fewer courses to lessen textbook costs, and 26% had chosen not to register for a course because of an expensive textbook. However, these results are hardly due to a desire to keep profits from content creators. When both textbook prices and tuition fees increase each year at rates that far outstrip inflation, students and their families are forced to make difficult decisions in how they afford post-secondary education. Today, the average undergraduate student accumulates $28,000 in public student debt for a 4-year degree. A student relying on loans may find that a $200 textbook eats up most of their weekly loan disbursement and thus is put in the impossible position of choosing between course books and groceries. To conclude, I would like to say that both the Supreme Court decisions and Parliament's passage of the Copyright Modernization Act in 2012 affirmed the wisdom and justice of our current copyright regime, including fair dealing. Canadian copyright law has positioned Canada as a leader in the fair and dynamic exchange of knowledge and ideas. We ask this committee to protect our copyrights in the interest of students and educators, but also of the broader Canadian public. Students have benefited from a good system over the last several years, and we are eager to continue working with this government to maintain and strengthen it. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. We're going to jump right into questions. Mr. Longfield, you have 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. It is a complex topic when it comes to copyright, and really different opinions depending on who you're talking to. Mr. Davidson, you outlined one of the stresses here is the balance between paying content creators for their works and being able to access their works as somebody trying to learn from previous people's publishing. Looking at the online platforms like Cengage, or there's other platforms available for professors to access information and for students to access information, could you talk about how Cengage works within the university platforms?
I can reiterate the university's position in terms of trying to find the balance between the rights of users and the rights of creators of content and rights holders, and that's an ongoing challenge that we've had. The decisions over the last few years by the Supreme Court, by Parliament in the 2012 Act, have helped clarify the ground considerably. One of the newer developments in undergraduate teaching and in teaching generally has been the use of learning management systems, and I'm not familiar with the one you speak directly about. But again, the learning management systems are a tool that in many ways can reaffirm the rights of rights holders and the rights of users to effectively use the content and make sure that appropriate compensation is given. There's a wide range of capacities in those learning management systems, but it's separate from the issue of copyright directly before us today.
I've spoken with, thank you for that. I had a roundtable in Guelph, and I had the different stakeholders, the university, the bookstore, librarians, the researchers, and the publishing houses. And one of the things that came up from the library was the institutional licensing of course material, and the libraries having inflationary costs that they have to deal with of keeping libraries open. The Guelph Library did receive federal funding for an expansion for the physical location, but the operational costs continue to increase. So when it comes to policy around institutional licensing, could you maybe speak to what your members are telling you?
A couple of comments there, and again, as the committee embarks on its work, I really invite you to visit campuses across the country to see what a dynamic learning environment there is, how the different factors at play within a university are working with new technology and new pedagogy to ensure that students have an optimum experience, a quality experience. On the issue of buying content, I want to be clear that universities do buy a considerable amount of content each year, over $300 million a year in library acquisitions. That number is large and growing. We're a major customer of the rights holders. There are also a variety of new ways of buying the rights to use content. For many years, Access Copyright was the primary source, but there are other sources now that may be more purpose-built to the needs of students, the needs of faculty. And so as the committee embarks on its study, we really encourage a detailed look at those different tools and techniques available. Because I think what many in the university community would say is, we don't mind paying appropriate amounts for content, we just don't want to have to pay for it 3 times.
Right. Thank you. And Charlotte, the students that I've talked to talked about finding other ways to get course materials. There was a hashtag textbooks broke, a site that students were using. There's student stores that are starting up, campus stores, competing with maybe some of the online stores. Back in the 70s, when I was buying textbooks, you could buy used textbooks in a different way than they're doing now. Could you talk about how the students are getting creative around? You mentioned it in your in the presentation, but how are students getting access to information that they need for their studies?
Well, as you said, I certainly acknowledge that students are increasingly struggling to afford all aspects of post-secondary education, and that includes textbooks. And when students are put in a position where tuition fees are increasing at exponential rates every single year, they're certainly having to make difficult choices. But I think to, pin any decline in income for content creators on students is kind of a false characterization. For one, as I said, students are spending significant sums, over $600 in average annual household family spending on university textbooks. But moreover, adequate funding for arts and for writers is not mutually exclusive from fair dealing, and we certainly support that, just not on the backs of students. Now, the other mechanisms I talked about, open educational resources, open access journals, those are mechanisms for more dynamic exchanges of information amongst the educational community, but certainly are not, at the expense of content creators, but rather championed by many content creators within the academic community.
Thank you both for your time.
Thank you very much. We're going to jump to Mr. Genereux. You have 5 minutes.
5 minutes, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here, and wonderful to kick off what sounds like a long study with both of you guys and your organizations here before us. Do quickly want to ask a question with regards to something that was done back in early 2015. One of my predecessors, Minister Holder, when he announced the Tri-Council Granting Agency's open access policy. I'd like to get your, Mr. Davidson, your assessment of that policy that stipulates the reports from grant-funded research must be made freely available to the public within 12 months after publishing.
We're already into a great conversation today because we're seeing the dynamics of a shifting landscape, and the initiative of the previous government to ensure that publicly funded research would be publicly available has been a useful development. It's been one that our members watch with great interest. It's been one that I know students and graduate researchers benefit from. And it does address one of the questions of both content creation and accessibility of the research that's been done.
Great. So could that expand to other areas? It's within the granting councils. Do you see a benefit of that expanding to?
Well, the open access publishing developments is, as I say, a very rapidly evolving landscape internationally. The academic community is watching it around the world. It is an effort, to pick up on an earlier point, to try to mitigate the exorbitant, excessive costs that publishers can derive from their academic journals, from their academic publications. And so I would hope in the course of this study the committee would look at the changing nature of academic publishing in the world and the concentration of ownership and the impacts that has on the ability of people to access the information that has been publicly funded.
Great. Shifting gears a little bit in the limited time I have, get your assessment, both you, Charlotte, and you, Paul, on the amount of time it takes the Copyright Board to conclude its cases. And I'll leave it at that, kind of open-ended on the Copyright Board in general.
You go ahead.
Okay, sure. So a number of people even around this table have been around copyright issues for a very long time, and I think you will find unanimity as you tour the country on the importance for reform of the Copyright Board, for it to be able to come to timely decisions. That's the key issue, and we were pleased to participate in the Government of Canada's consultation on this. We are expecting those deliberations to conclude shortly. But one of the big challenges in this whole terrain is providing certainty to all the players. And as the Copyright Board for many years was understaffed, for many years was not fully, the board was not fully constituted, their ability to absorb, to carry out its proceedings was really compromised by that. So a more robust Copyright Board could be part of the solution to resolving some of these challenges so they're not always before Parliament.
Yeah, I think that, amongst, as I was saying, our recognition of what is a strong system of copyright right now, there are obviously opportunities to strengthen copyright law. An area of particular interest for students and academics is how copyright law is interrelating to Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous ownership of information. And so I think that some robust consideration is certainly warranted, and there are opportunities to make what is already a strong piece of legislation stronger.
Anything specific to the Copyright Board on your part? No? Okay. All right, Chair. Good.
You still have 30 seconds.
I said I'm good.
Okay. All right. We're going to move to Mr. Massey. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. I think one of the things that we can't miss, it is, especially in this academia sector, is that the students are the ultimate customer. And when you think about it, they will be the ones that incur personal debt or personal expense by large financial contributions for their tuition, the materials, and the living lifestyle required to spend that much time in education. They will also incur provincial debt because most provinces are in a deficit right now, and they will be responsible for retiring that debt. So that will be incurred upon them. They also will actually secure a participation rate in a federal debt, as we are federally indebted, and they will again have to pay for that allocations from programs that are signed over the different budgets. And lastly, they'll also have to incur the costs of those provincial, federal governments of any private sector incentives that are provided for because we are in debt. And so reduction in taxes, shred tax credits, other types of incentives are all borrowing costs that will then have to be paid back by themselves. So I think that when we're looking at fair dealing here, one of the things that hasn't been solved is the fair dealing of students in what they're actually contributing to the greater Canadian economy. And hence, hopefully when we see something come out of this, there will be some type of recognition that they are probably one of the single largest customers that are still not receiving probably the reciprocity they deserve. With that, it has been noted the public funding and the sharing of information with regards to the, I guess, grants that are provided for those things. Do you have any comments regarding to that? I believe that perhaps there's probably some also onerous, or at least some participation necessary for private sector participation. So if you are I guess, a benefactor of public funds from the private sector, should there maybe be perhaps some sharing agreements, given the fact that it could be the research and development grants that is provided. It could be, again, tax reductions or abeyance or government programs where they receive research, not only that, but also staffing components through some of the job creation programs that are out there. Is there a role in the private sector to actually share when they actually receive some money from the public purse?
Clarify the last part of your question.
Yeah. So with the private, in your opinion, is there a responsibility for the private sector to share some of their materials and information and product at the end of the day? If there's private, similar to a public, if there's a public contribution into a private entity. So say, for example, it could be a software, it could be some type of innovation, it could be through the arts community, it could be whatever, where there's a financial contribution or of some sort to the individual that comes from public funds for their private profits.
So I think a trend that has long concerned students, and particularly the graduate student members of the Canadian Federation of Students, is this issue of earmarking public funding for private sector interests. And I'm hopeful that we are seeing a shift away from that in terms of reinvestment in basic investigative-led research that we saw in the most recent budget. However, certainly when private or public money is being spent on research and development, I think it is critical, as Mr. Davidson affirmed, that research and development remain publicly accessible and within the public interest. Yeah.
Mr. Davidson?
I'll pick up on the most recent budget and the transformative investments that have been made through the granting councils. That's a really important new set of developments that the university community really strongly welcomes. I'm also thinking, as you're speaking about the investments that are made around cluster strategy and the investments that are being made there.
That's a good example.
One of the I think really compelling impacts of that investment is it is bringing private sector, public sector even students as well, young researchers, into a collaborative enterprise, and to accelerate the exchange of information and ideas for the benefit of Canada's economy. So I think there are places where we're seeing that happening already, as I say, as you go through several weeks and months of hearings, what you will hear is about an economy that's in digital transition and what the impacts of that are, and how to make sure that the core mission of delivering high quality education to students is preserved. I'm struck in the conversation already about how different the undergraduate experience is today than it was, whether it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. You look at the development of e-reserves, for example, where students can access the required readings 24/7 with copyright cleared, appropriate use from their devices at home. And so as you're having this wide-ranging conversation, just keep in mind the dramatic shifts over the last 20 years and the opportunities that presents for a really thoughtful public policy.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Sheehan. You've got 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much to our presenters for the starting of our copyright study. It's the 101st meeting, so this is Copyright 101, I guess, right away. So my first question is for Paul. Your organization, Universities Canada, has made strong statements about the importance of Indigenous education as it relates to truth and reconciliation. You made it a priority, and you recognize the barriers that Canada's Indigenous people face as it relates to getting a university education. First Nations, Métis, Inuit. And in my riding, we have Algoma University, which is a member of Universities Canada, and they have underwent a significant transition. It was a formal residential school, and it's now a university. And the federal government has just recently invested in the university to maintain its infrastructure, and also a new Anishinaabeg Discovery Center, a $10.2 million project, which is going to have the chief's libraries there. So the artifacts, the teachings, a whole bunch of things. So they're undergoing that process. The infrastructure's going up, and that's going to be really what Chief Shinwalk wanted, was a teaching wigwam. So we know that there has been concerns for quite a while from Indigenous people about copyright. So Paul, how could we help Indigenous people better protect their traditional knowledge and culture expressions?
Thank you very much for the question, and thanks for recognizing the work that Canada's universities have been embarked in now for close to a decade on improving Indigenous access and success, engaging meaningfully in collaborative research, and ensuring that we're engaged in the process of reconciliation coming out of the recommendations of the TRC. As it happens, just this week we're reporting to our members and to all Canadians some of the progress that we've made in recent years on these files. And really one of the big items ahead for all of us to consider is the question of Indigenous knowledge, how is it appropriately recognized academically, how is it appropriately recognized in society, and what are the rights around that Indigenous knowledge beyond copyright to other forms of intellectual property as well. And in that regard, something the committee may want to look at is the recent research strategy released by ITK, the Inuit representative group, that really addresses these issues in greater detail. And they may be a group that would be interested in appearing before the committee. The whole reconciliation project is not one of months or years or even decades. And it's interesting that at the very start of this conversation you're having today, you're bringing the Indigenous conversation to the table. And I think that's a very valuable addition.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you. For the Canadian Federation of Students, when we go back, we've been talking about some history here. Mm-hmm. And on April 10th, 2013, Adam Awad, then National Chairperson of the Canadian Federation of Students, referred to access copyright legal proceedings against York University as a desperate attempt to wrangle public institutions into obsolete licensing agreements that ignored the breadth of fair dealing. So there's a few questions that I have around that. I guess the first one would be, what changes would the Canadian Federation of Students want to see to Canada's collective licensing regime?
Okay. So I think that, first and foremost, I would say that the Canadian Federation of Students recognizes that, in fact, the copyright regime we have at present is very strong. I think that we are interested in pursuing some of these reforms that you've just brought up in terms of better protecting Indigenous access to intellectual property or ownership of intellectual property and protecting Indigenous knowledge. I know as well that there are concerns with current Crown ownership under copyright law, but I think that first and foremost what students want to affirm for this committee is that the current system is working well, and we do think that this is a strong system for protecting students' access to knowledge and information.
So
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
We're going to move to Mr. Lloyd. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to start by saying I'm going to be splitting my time with my colleague here.
No.
I think I'm probably one of the few people on this committee, I can't speak for Matt, who's probably still paying off their student loans. And but that being said, with my recent experience graduating in 2014, one thing that was really useful for me when I went to university was the textbook tax credit that had been inputted by the previous government. And I think I've just asked for a comment from the Canadian Federation of Students on what was the impact of losing the textbook tax credit in a recent budget.
So the Canadian Federation of Students actually advocates for a model of student assistance that is based on upfront needs-based grants rather than tax credits, because we do find that tax credits that come after the fact of an education disproportionately benefit those who have the most money to spend on post-secondary education and need that assistance the least. However, I do understand that that's not what the committee is studying here today. Certainly, if you'd like to discuss some of our recommendations on increasing the accessibility of post-secondary education, I'd be happy to do that. But I will say that fair dealing is absolutely a small but very important piece of increasing students' access to post-secondary education.
Absolutely. Well, I just considered it because, in this document that we received, textbook costs are such a significant impact on students. And so as part of the market of supply and demand, any sort of thing helps in kind of creating the demand for students if they can afford it. But my next question is more for Universities Canada, Mr. Davidson. What sort of future do you envision, if the legislation goes, if the copyright modernization goes the way that you're looking for? How do you see that compensating creators in that sort of environment?
So as my preliminary remarks made, when I made my preliminary remarks, I reaffirmed the value of the changes that were made in 2012 by the previous government, by the previous parliament, by the subsequent court proceedings that have been interpreting that legislation, and would encourage the committee to allow the courts to continue to do their work. The key issue as you embark on this study is to find the appropriate balance, and that is a hard one to find. I will acknowledge that. I think universities, as both users and creators, have an appreciation for the challenge of that. And as I was commenting in my remarks, universities are also centers of creative energy, of creative culture, of a dynamic cultural sector, and so. We want to make sure that creators are appropriately compensated. We want to make sure that users are not paying more than once for works that they have rights to use. We want to make sure that students can exercise their rights to use works. We want to make sure that researchers have rights to use works to do their research. But it is a question of balance.
Thank you. How much time do I have left, Chair?
45.
This is my time now. Thank you. Thank you.
If anything, just to get on record that my wife's a physician, so I too am also paying fees, proxy through her. Yes, if we come back a little bit to the first line of questioning, Mr. Davidson, on on the publicly funded research being made public. Is it your opinion that that should also apply to all recipients of public funds, with those within the private sector as well?
To be honest, we don't have a view on that explicitly. It's, again, we are active participants in the work that you're doing to try to assess what makes most sense in an evolving landscape.
Okay, great. And if you quickly expand on some of the court cases you referred to, and see as they're making their way through the court, and what type of legislative changes you'd like to see specifically in reference to those cases.
I should say at the outset that we are seeking leave to be interveners in one case that's being considered. That's the York case. So I want to be very careful that we don't comment explicitly about that. And again, to come back to the point that the previous committee and the previous parliament, I think there were 3 ministers involved. There were 3 rounds of consultations to get the Copyright Modernization Act to its current state in 2012. That was a massive undertaking, and we believe it struck a fair balance. It struck a correct balance. And so to be upsetting that apple cart as universities are investing in compliance, as frankly rights holders are trying to develop new products and services, to dramatically change what we think is a fair balance right now would not be in the public interest.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Bayless. You have 5.
Thank you, Chair. First question, we heard about your increasing expenses vis-a-vis copyright, and thank you said $370 million this year. On the same token, same other side of the coin, we're hearing a lot from small Canadian publishers that are coming to us and saying we've seen a radical drop-off. Where's the money going? So you're paying more, they're not getting any, they're not satisfied. What's happening?
It's a fair question, and it's something I have great sympathy for. The public policy tools that were developed in the 60s and 70s to create a vibrant Canadian culture were extremely effective. I think the real public policy challenge is how do we ensure we have new public policy tools that respond to the new reality to ensure that Canadian stories can be told far and wide. I think the Canadian Cultural Policy Review that looked at export opportunities is something that bears further scrutiny. But in direct answer to your question, about 92% of library holdings are created by academics. The content is created by academics. They're not created by the small Canadian publishers. They're not created by the literary authors. I think there are other vehicles to address the needs of small presses.
Yes, so I get that, but let's be just to the point.
Yep.
They said since fair dealings came in, they've seen a radical drop-off in their income. On the other hand, you say we're paying more and more and more. Mm-hmm. Where's your money going? You're not giving them the money. It's got to be going somewhere else if you're paying more, correct?
Yes.
Where's that money going?
The money is going to a variety of intellectual property from a variety of sources. International publishers,
this is your chance.
International rights holders, and other.
This is your chance to talk to us, because they're going to be talking to us and telling us that you should be clamped down on fair dealing. So we need to address their concerns. It's not working for them, and if unless they're misleading me or whatever, they're saying that they're seeing the point of even bankruptcy. So we need to know. Now you mentioned monopolies and publications, and I think Ms. Cadell mentioned about open source. Where's the money going if it's not going to our Canadian small businesses?
Intellectual property is being purchased in record amounts by Canadian universities through other publishers, through other sources of content providers, and that's the best answer I can provide you. It's not that.
Do you know how much more you would be paying if fair dealings, if in 2012 the fair dealings hadn't come in?
I mean, again, I think some are trying to establish causation by correlation. We're living in a disruptive world. If you look at how the taxi industry has changed over the last 5 years, if you look at how other sectors are roiling because of disruptive change, I think there are all sorts of public policy measures and mechanisms that can be used to support small Canadian publishers and small Canadian authors. But fair dealing is not the approach. It's using the wrong tool.
Fair enough. That they've come to us or at least come to me and said this concept, and I want to touch on that point that you had about, you said it's going through the court systems. I think you were referring to Access Copyright versus York, which to my understanding, and I've just read summaries of it, that York lost and said that they're abusing fair dealing and not paying these publishers. But then in your testimony, you said, let it go through the courts. I know it's being appealed. Is it your feeling that if it is appealed to the Supreme Court that they will reverse what the federal court did?
There are a number of proceedings underway. York is one of them, and we are a potential intervener on that, so I want to be cautious about commenting in specifics on that case. What I will draw your attention to is the ruling of the federal court a year ago, and as recently as 4 weeks ago, that strongly upheld the principles of fair dealing for educational purposes. And so there are a number of court cases underway.
So in that sense, in the end, it comes down to what's fair, right? What's fair? I've written a book, and you're using 8 chapters of the book. If there's only 2 chapters in the book, you're using 50%. If there's 10 chapters, you're using 10%. I'll ask both of you, but starting with you, Ms. Cadell, what would be a fair, in your worldview, fair dealing, saying taking a book and taking a section of the book and not paying for it? What would be fair in your worldview and the view of the students?
Well, as I've said, I think that the current fair dealing provisions under the copyright law are very strong, but I actually wanted to address what you were bringing up earlier in terms of concerns from small publishing industry about declines in profits being associated with fair dealing. And I would absolutely echo your statement that that's a matter of correlation and not causation. And I think there's strong evidence for this because actually internationally, profits and income in terms of content creators and small independent publishers are on the decline. And that's not because of fair dealing. That's happening in many countries without fair dealing for the education sector. I would say that's much more attached to, in fact, a global trend of stagnant and declining profits and wages. Now, I think that both myself and Mr. Davidson affirm that there is a strong role for the government to play in funding arts and culture. And in fact, I, as a person who represents students who are aspiring content creators, many of whom are already content creators themselves, I'm very concerned about lack of income for content creators, but government investment in arts and culture for this country ought to come through direct government funding for arts and culture and not through subsidizing that through the education sector and mostly on the backs of students.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to move to back to Mr. Genereux.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a copyright law expert from Osgood, Professor Weber, I believe how you pronounce it. He expressed a concern that that clarity in terms of the exact meaning of fair dealing has been left up to the courts, given the ambiguity on its definition in the Copyright Act. Do you believe copyright should be updated to provide a clear definition of fair dealing, or should the responsibility be left to the courts?
Let me jump in and say, first of all, fair dealing is a right that's existed for decades. Fair dealing for education was made explicit just 5 years ago in a series of 5 decisions by the Supreme Court of Canada. So this is complex law that needs to be determined. There are a variety of approaches to addressing fair dealing. Some advocate very clear definitions of bright lines. Others have different views. I think you're at the start of a very long process. We're going to hear a lot of conflicting testimony, and you have a really big task in front of you. I believe that the Act in 2012 struck an appropriate balance, that we have a set of guidelines that our sector is using that is, in my view, concurrent with the legislation, and that is being tested in the courts right now.
I would concur.
Do you want to get on record and shake your head?
I would concur.
Okay, perfect. Great. How would you assess the value and impact of collective licensing agreements proposed by Access Copyright and Copybec since 2010 on students, teachers, and copyright holders?
So I think, I'll go back decades here. Access Copyright was a creative solution in a different century. It has a product that is not meeting the needs of students. It has a product that's not meeting the needs of institutions. Institutions have made efforts to encourage them to be more market-oriented and work with one of their largest customers in a period of disruption. And instead of that, we've had continual litigation. So the experience that Canadian universities have had with the copyright agencies has not been universally positive. What we strive to do is make sure that creators are appropriately compensated, that users are able to exercise their rights in a way that's fair and balanced.
Concur?
I do. I would say that as I spoke about in my remarks, trends we've seen within the academic community towards opting towards more open models of accessing information that results in content creators being able to produce information and provide that information directly to the academic community in lieu of being forced to sell it to large corporate content owners and buy it back to access it at inflated prices, show that the priority of the education community is very much on being able to exchange and access information in a way that allows for a dynamic sharing of multiple forms of learning materials, multiple media, and a diversity of sources, which is absolutely in the best interest of researchers and educators and ultimately of students.
Very much. We're going to move to Mr. Jahari. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for witnesses for coming in today. I'm going to echo back some of the numbers that I've heard, and I'm going to kind of try to come to my colleague, Mr. Bailey's question in a different way. So what I heard is about $1 billion investment over 3 years. I also heard about $370 million this year. I heard that we have made the transition to about 20% print, 80% digital. And I also heard over 90% of the knowledge that's there, it's being generated by the academia. So when it comes to the fair dealing, I'm assuming a lot of the content that's being used, is it by that 20% hard copy that's been published, or is it a portion coming from the digital knowledge that's there? And are they correlated? Because I'm trying to get into really bringing a balance between fair dealing between the user and the creator, and also figuring out, how does the students fit in this fair dealing. So if you could shed some light on that one.
Sorry, can you?
Okay, so how does this fair dealing factor into your tuition, basically?
Okay, I am a little bit confused about your question. So I would say, fair dealing allows students to access a greater diversity of sources in terms of professors being able to bring sources outside traditional learning materials into the classroom to supplement textbooks and
the
what have you.
universities pay for that?
Yeah, that's allowed for under university licensing
Okay, so now
agreement.
going back to the universities, you've given us a number of investment that's been made, $1 billion over 2 years, $370 million, and where the sources are, and there's still the discrepancy between the creators saying our revenue is dropping and you're spending more money. So where is, again, coming back to my colleague's question, where is that money going, in your opinion?
Well, sorry, before you start, I would just affirm again that content creators worldwide are seeing a decline in income, and that is in countries with and without fair dealing. And this is a global trend of decreased wages, decreased and stagnant wages, of decreased public funding in arts and culture, and that's outside of fair dealing, and that's outside of spending trends in the education sector, which, as Mr. Davidson had affirmed, are on the rise. But if you wanted to comment further.
Sure. So, one of the critiques made in particular by Access Copyright is that their revenues are declining and therefore universities must not be paying. Universities have other sources to legally buy intellectual property, whether it's other copyright collectives, whether
And this
it's
is
other
an
clearance
opportunity for us
centers.
to tell us where our other sources are, so we can get educated on that.
Sure, and I might refer you to the Canadian Association of Research Librarians, who I believe have made a request to appear before you, who can describe the multi-million-dollar licenses which they negotiate on behalf of a consortium of universities to ensure that researchers and students have the most up-to-date research and information available at their fingertips, and that the creators are appropriately compensated.
Okay. You also touched on the copyright board with about a minute left. What would you change in the copy board if you're going to change one thing, help them?
Well, we did make a submission to the consultation process that was underway, where we talked about timely renewal of board members, full staffing of the board, improving the resources available for the board to do its work. Those are 2 or 3 suggestions right off the top, and I'd be happy to send you the copy of our submission.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And for the final 2 minutes, Mr. Massey.
Mr. Chair, and I think one of the challenges we'd have too with the creators is that if we do something different than right now, just turning over compensation to the university and others and organizations independent from Parliament is going to be highly complicated to see that follow through for real results. Because you're mentioning that there was more money that's been ever being spent on materials, but the vehicles that you now use to access that information appears to have changed from the past. Is that really where, I guess, the discussion is that, because they're asking over on the other side there about where's the money going, but to quite clear though, you're spending more money, but it's just going to different avenues than traditionally it has in the past. Is that correct, or is that?
It's part of the digital disruption about an evolving landscape. It's about the needs of students to be able to access different materials. And it's about the ability of, in the case of Canadian independent publishers, to produce materials that are relevant and important to the research work of universities. Again, I have sympathy for the small independent publishers. I have sympathy for the creators. But I think the fair dealing approach is the wrong tool. There are other mechanisms, like the public lending right, like the aid to publishing, like other Department of Canadian Heritage issues. But to suggest that fair dealing is the reason for the current state of Canadian publishing is misplaced.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure whether if the supposed salvation would be just getting rid of fair dealing for them anyways, and that's what I.
If I may say respectfully,
about.
Fair dealing is a right that's existed for decades. Yeah. Fair dealing is a right that has been extended to the education sector, not only by Parliament, but by the Supreme Court in 5 significant rulings in 2012. And I can't imagine members of Parliament just suggesting that they negotiate away other kinds of rights, because these are just rights. We can just negotiate away rights. This is the anniversary of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Are we just going to negotiate away our rights and freedoms?
And lastly, for students, has there been any measurement, or is there any way to measure if something changes with regards to copyright under this, I guess, discussions here, the increased potential costs or reduction of costs if a new system or regime is put in place? Is that too complicated, or is that something maybe perhaps we should put on the government? Should they change legislation, that perhaps a part of that legislative change be some type of measurement for the cost of students for changing copyright?
Very briefly, please.
Sure. Okay, briefly, I think that focusing too much on cost savings as part of fair dealing really misses the main point, which is that fair dealing enables students to access a diversity of learning materials in a climate...
That's not the question. The question is, if there is a change and it incurs a difference of the cost of tuition, should that be part of the decision if the change takes place, so there can be real measurement for the cost of students later?
I'm confused about how you're working the cost of tuition in with cost of learning materials or what have you.
Well, We can follow up, but you're arguing it's costing more if it changes, but that's what we're trying to find out, if there is a true measurement about the cost of students related to copyright or not.
Well, I think the cost would be that students would be paying for any supplementary materials brought into the classroom, or that they would be seeing a classroom environment with a much poorer diversity of materials, essentially.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm afraid we're out of time. And there goes our first panel. It's important to understand that as committee members, if we can't get witnesses to say what they need to be say on file, then it doesn't enter into the report. So all manners of questions have to be asked, and we don't want to assume anything, and that's why this is so important, and we know it'll be complicated. But listen, thank you very much for coming in. We're going to suspend for 2 minutes, a very quick 2 minutes, and we'll get the next panel in, and thank you very much. Everybody's back. Welcome back, everybody. For the second portion of this, we have from the Canadian Association of University Teachers, Pamela Foster, Director of Research and Political Action, Mr. Paul Jones, Education Officer, and then from Campus Stores Canada, Sean Gilbertson, Manager Course Materials, University of Waterloo. I'm sure you sat down and you watched the beginning of the proceedings, and the name of the game is to get stuff on record, and that's how we'll be able to present a good report. So we're going to start right off with Mr. Jones. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Paul Jones, and I'm with the Canadian Association of University Teachers, CAUT. I'm joined by my colleague Pam Foster, and we would like to begin by thanking the committee for presenting us the opportunity to appear before you. CAUT represents 70,000 professors and librarians at 122 colleges and universities across Canada. Our members are writers, every year creating tens of thousands of articles, books, and other works. We understand the importance of authors' rights, and as a labour organization have succeeded in protecting these rights through the collective bargaining process. Our members are also teachers and librarians whose success depends on making information available to others. In these capacities, they have been at the forefront of implementing new ways to create and share knowledge with each other, with students, and with the public at large. The dual nature of our membership has taught us that copyright should serve all Canadians equally. It is in this respect to the need for the Act to serve all Canadians that we raise our first issue. In their letter to this committee, the Honourable Nadine Baines and Melanie Joly stated, "During your hearings and deliberations, we invite you to pay special attention to the needs and interests of Indigenous peoples as part of Canada's cross-cutting efforts at reconciliation. This is something we wish to address." From Indigenous communities, CAUT has heard firsthand the damage caused by the appropriation of their cultural heritage and of the failure of the Copyright Act to provide protection. In fact, we know of one provision in the Act directly responsible for the loss of a community's stories. Indigenous elders and scholars are working to address this broader issue as are dedicated experts within the Public Service of Canada. We encourage the committee to support these efforts and ensure that the Copyright Act recognizes Indigenous control over their traditional and living knowledge. The other issue we wish to address this afternoon is fair dealing. Not that long ago, the Copyright Act's purpose was seen as primarily benefiting the owners of literary and artistic works. This has changed with the Supreme Court's 2002 decision in Théberge, an important turning point. In that decision, the Court said, "The proper balance among these and other public policy objectives lies not only in recognizing the creator's rights, but in giving due weight to their limited nature. In crassly economic terms, it would be as inefficient to overcompensate artists and authors for the right of reproduction as it would be self-defeating to undercompensate them." This idea of balance was expanded in a series of more recent Supreme Court decisions, and it was affirmed by Parliament in the 2012 Copyright Modernization Act. This approach, in which user and owner rights are given equal weight, has accompanied enormous innovation in the way knowledge is created and shared. Librarians and professors have been at the forefront of the open access movement and the open education resource movement, in which the journal articles and textbooks that they write are made freely available to the online world. Fair dealing has been a small but important part of this innovation, allowing students, teachers, and researchers to easily exchange material in a timely fashion. For example, it would allow a class to quickly share a controversial newspaper editorial, an excerpt from a movie, or a chapter from a rare out-of-print book. The recognition of fair dealing for educational purposes by the Supreme Court and by Parliament has been a benefit to Canada. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, not everyone is happy with fair dealing, and there are two things you will hear or will have already heard. First, you'll hear that poets and storytellers in Canada are often struggling at or near the poverty line. This is absolutely true. Second, you will hear that fair dealing is in part responsible for this. This is not true. The impoverishment of large sections of our artistic community far predates educational fair dealing. It is also a sad fact across the globe, including in jurisdictions where educational fair dealing does not exist. The reality is fair dealing covers a small amount of content use on campus, of which an even smaller fraction is literary works by Canadian authors. In fact, when it comes to supporting authors and publishers, Canada's post-secondary education sector has a proud record to point to. Yes, we are developing new ways to create and share information, and it is true that in the last 10 years there's been enormous disruption in the world economy, with more losers than winners in all sectors. But we, the post-secondary education sector, continue to spend hundreds of millions of dollars per year on content. So to conclude, we urge the committee to affirm the Copyright Act as legislation for all Canadians by addressing the concerns of Indigenous communities and by supporting a public post-secondary education sector where a combination of open access journals, open education resources, fair dealing, and hundreds of millions of dollars spent annually on content provides the best possible learning and research environment. Thank you again for inviting us, and thank you for the important work that you're doing.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Sean Gilbertson from Campus Stores Canada. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Sean Gilbertson. I'm the Course Materials Manager at the University of Waterloo. I'm here today on behalf of Campus Stores Canada, the National Trade Association of institutionally owned and operated campus stores. Campus Stores Canada has 80 member stores and more than 150 vendor and supplier associates nationwide. This means that if you know one of the million or so post-secondary education students, you probably know someone that is served by a member of Campus Stores Canada. Campus stores serve students by ensuring they have access to high-quality learning resources by acting as a conduit for the distribution and fulfillment of print and digital course material. We are here today with a simple message. Fair dealing has not negatively impacted the sale and distribution of academic material in Canada. The 2012 expansion of fair dealing to include educational use as an exemption is an important clarification of user rights. Importantly, this review must be considered within the context of a rapidly evolving marketplace. To be clear, the higher education publishing market has seen a significant shift away from traditional print-based mediums towards digital learning products, often sold at lower prices. This might clarify some of the questions asked earlier. Further disruption is a result of changes in consumer behavior, provincial policy changes, and a competitive online marketplace. These changes are part of an industry faced with increased competition and more choice for consumers in the way they purchase, access, and consume course material. However, I should note that unaffordable prices of some course material has led to decreased demand for expensive textbooks that may have only been slightly updated. In addition, there has been significant market saturation of print learning material with increased competition through the growth of textbook rentals, imported international editions, peer-to-peer selling, and increased demand for less expensive older editions. Students, the ultimate users of learning materials, no longer see value in the expensive single-use text. As with other industries like music and video, user expectations of value has shifted. New channels, new business models, and new market entrants is further perpetuating the disruption of traditional print revenues, fostering investment and development of digital products and subscription-based services, with early indicators pointing to significant growth. With that said, we would like to underscore an important point from the joint ministers responsible for copyright when they stated in a letter to this committee, quoting that the Copyright Act itself might not be the most effective tool to address all the concerns stemming from recent disruptions. Campus Stores Canada encouraged the committee to keep this top of mind when reviewing briefs and listening to testimonies from creators and copyright owners. To conclude, it is imperative that this committee recognize the important balance between creators and users of intellectual property and the value of fair dealing. Fair dealing remains a fundamental right necessary to safeguard creator and user interests as this industry innovates and evolves. On behalf of Campus Stores Canada and the students we serve, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you very much, and we are going to go right into questions. Mr. Sheehan, you have 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, and those are great presentations. Earlier on, I'd asked about, how the government, how this committee could make recommendations as it related to better addressing the long-standing issue of Indigenous concerns over copywriting. And Paul, I know in your remarks you had just made a statement about that, and again, I don't know if you were here, but in Sault Ste. Marie we have a number of Indigenous activities going on as it relates to truth and reconciliation, and building of the Anishinaabe Discovery Center, which the infrastructure is being built right now, which is going to work with the university, Algoma University, which is also a site which was a formal residential school. And they are really trying to address the issue of Indigenous education, some of the barriers that are involved with it, but also helping address the truth and reconciliation recommendations. Part of that is that they're going to be housing a lot of artifacts. There's going to be a lot of teachings. And there is concerns about Indigenous copywriting in Canada. So Paul, would you be able to expand a little further in your comments about your views or your organization's views on how Canada can better protect Indigenous teachings and cultural artifacts, etc., in institutions through better copyright legislation?
Thank you for that question, and I'll try to answer. I guess the first thing I should clarify is that we take our knowledge from our Indigenous members, Indigenous academic staff, who have explained the problems to us, and we're trying to convey that along, but they will be the main spokespeople on this who will bring forward the concerns more directly. So I would not want to appear to be preempting that or speaking on behalf of another community. What we have learned is that Western notions of intellectual property settled in the Copyright Act or the Patent Act with very precise definitions of individual or corporate ownership, very precise timelines for the creation of knowledge and how long that knowledge lasts, do not fit at all well with the different kinds of Indigenous knowledge systems that exist within Aboriginal communities. So a very difficult mix between those two things, our Copyright Act and traditional approaches to Indigenous knowledge. The one particular example that came to our attention was a historian in New Brunswick in the 70s recorded stories from elders. And when the community wanted to access those stories, access those recordings, access the transcripts, they were not able to. And the reason was that copyright ownership was claimed in those stories by the person who'd made the recordings. And I think it's now Section 18 of the Act, I think, that gives those rights to the recordist. So in this case, the community was not able to access the stories. The elders who had told the stories died. Most of their children died, and it is just now that they have finally broken through and been able to publish these stories. So that was a specific example of one small part of the Act that, in that instance, caused real damage to that community, real sorrow and heartbreak. And I believe that same situation has happened in other places. But there are other situations as well where, because the copyright requires a specific creator, someone to claim ownership, and a specific timeline, that it doesn't fit well with notions of community ownership, and it doesn't fit well with notions of ownership since time immemorial, going back and going forward. We don't have, and would not purport to say exactly what has to be done. We know that there are experts within Indigenous communities and elders who can speak to this, and we just want to put our support behind them in making the changes necessary to protect Indigenous knowledge.
Well, thank you for that, Paul. And we wanted to make sure that we got that on the table right away as this is the first meeting of this copyright study. And so for both sets of witnesses, I really appreciate your contribution to that important discussion we'll have later. For Campus Stores Canada, Sean, what is the position of Campus Stores Canada on the current litigation between collective societies and Canadian universities? Could you delve into that?
I think I can only speak to the role that Campus Stores Canada played prior to the 2012. So Campus Stores Canada was responsible for course pack printing, and roughly my understanding is about 75% of the revenues came from that previous licensing arrangement. As we understand it, there was two parts to that licensing arrangement. One that was a blanket FTE fee that covered all incidental copying, and then 10 cents per page for print course packs. One of the key differentiators that we've seen leading up to 2012 and afterwards is because of the increased expenditures in library licensing, we saw that shift to e-reserve use. And so, needless to say, there is less of a need for that type of licensing scheme when, students would otherwise be paying twice for that course material.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Monsieur Bernier. Vous avez 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question is addressed to Mr. Gilbertson.
I just want to know a little bit more in details what your members are doing to be sure to respect the law right now, and also what is the impact on their activities if they want to promote their rights. So can you just answer the first part?
Sure, I probably can't speak more broadly on the education sector. Certainly Campus Stores Canada, we're involved in the sale and distribution of course material, not necessarily copyright enforcement. However, we do have individuals that are part of our staff that have expertise in copyright licensing. So for example, we still adhere to transactional license that are required for various permitted uses, those which exceed fair dealing exceptions. So does that help answer your question?
Yeah. And what is the big change that we must do for the renew of this legislation? Do you have, if you have only one recommendation, what would be your recommendation?
It's simply not to address fair dealing. There's no reason to change the current law.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question for Mr. Jones. Thank you very much. So, how can we assure us that the university professor will be able to respect that legislation and at the same time also to their right to be protected? If you look at the legislation actually that we have in front of us, what is the biggest concern from the university professor with that legislation?
You had asked for one concern, and our biggest concerns, we have 5 issues we want to bring forward.
Yeah.
The first one is to leave fair dealing alone.
Yeah, okay.
You know that. We're also very concerned, as in our opening statement, that the concerns of Indigenous communities are addressed in the Act.
Yeah.
Beyond that, the current term is life plus 50. That's a reasonable approach. To the extent that that can be protected in national legislation, what with international trade agreements starting to impinge on that, we urge that it remain at life plus 50. The Copyright Modernization Act of 2012 did a good job in moving a lot of things forward. One area where it didn't quite succeed was on the issue of technological protection measures. In particular, a small but elegant change there that would allow digital locks to be broken for non-infringing purposes. So if there are reasons that you can legally reproduce something, but it's in a digital format and it's protected, you should be able to still go in and do that. The other issue that we were interested in talking about further, and we'll develop these in our brief or submission, is the issue of crown copyright, which we would see wanting to see loosened to be moved back to allow Canadians better access to the information that the government produces. Ultimately with the goal perhaps to abolishing it, but some baby steps along the way to move that forward.
Thank you.
Sorry. All right, we're going to jump to Mr. Massey. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that, I'm going to touch on the digital locks. Give us an example as to what's taking place and where that can be problematic. I think that's an important part of the previous review that took place that seemed to get eclipsed in terms of its understanding of the repercussions. Can you perhaps give us a little bit of an example as to?
I will try with an example, and it's an old example already. Let's say a professor is looking to present a class on presentation of professors in popular culture or presentation of politicians in popular culture, and they want to show some clips from a DVD or a video or some kind of streaming mechanism. And it may be that they have to break into that in order to copy those clips. Let's say it's a 2-hour movie and they want to show 2 minutes of it. It may not even reach the threshold of fair dealing. It may be an insubstantial use, so it's perfectly legal to do that in terms of what the Copyright Act says. But because you're not allowed to break digital locks, it would be an infringing activity.
Yeah, and it's like a small segment, as you mentioned, and part of it's a practical application. It wouldn't be necessarily that the artists would have an objection to it. It would be the encumbrance to try to find the producer, of the lock, the material, and so forth. That was in terms of trying to get that access. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I think one of the advantages of fair dealing is it allows quick and ready access to materials to present in a classroom.
Yeah. With regards to Mr. Gilbertson, in terms of fair dealing, what has changed in terms of give us a kind of a snapshot from a student's perspective of in the last 5 years in terms of even bookstores? I mean, there's a lot that's taken place in general, but what do you think is, and you mentioned, I think it was the quote, I had to write it down because it was no longer see value in, I was going to say, like, I didn't see value in that in 1991 when one chapter was changed in a textbook and you missed out on those that were selling them beforehand and so forth. And But maybe perhaps you can give us a little more insight as to what's changed in the last 5 years.
I understand your question. Thank you, Brian. My understanding over the last half decade or so is we have seen a significant shift from traditional print-based products to born digital learning products tied to assessment. And so this is where we've seen the lion's share of investments from large multinational publishers. And certainly, we represent a specific digital intermediary channel where we've seen approximately 50 million since inception total cumulative sales. And so, when this type of product is tied to assessment, students are essentially forced to pay. They don't necessarily have an option, to share a book or to, use a copy from the library as an example. And so in the province of Ontario, we have seen some change in policy that allows the use for these particular products as long as institutions have clear guidelines or policies in place that protects student interests.
And when you're, I guess, has there been more of a movement towards maybe some more individual agreements with regards to the use of resources, materials, and so forth, versus that of is that happening more often, or is it still a blanket policy, or do you have like different products in the university bookstores that might have a more variance and independent decision about the usage policies?
Sure. I think maybe just to answer your question simply, and I'll just draw on a question from earlier this afternoon, Cengage Learning just released a product that allows students to access the entire repertoire within their catalog, and so that comes at a cost per term or per year, and so we are seeing some early signs of changes similar to other content industries where content is ubiquitous. Users pay a nominal price and they get access to way more content than they would today.
And do I have much time? No, that's fine. I'll go back.
All right, thank you. We're going to move to Mr. Bayless. You have 5 minutes.
You both reflected back similar points that were made by the previous witnesses, which is leave fair dealings alone, and we at the same time recognizing that authors and small publishers are making less money. Starting with you, Mr. Jones, you represent teachers. Some of them are the authors, let's say, and yet they're not unhappy, as you're the representative, they're not unhappy with the fair dealings right now, if I understand. Is that correct? Where's the flow of the money going if these universities, if there's more and more money going somewhere, but it's not going to our creators and it's not going to our small publishers?
I heard that question earlier, and I thought about it, and I have at least one answer, and $120 million a year goes to the CRKN, the Canada Research Knowledge Network, which is a consortium of universities that purchases kind of a blanket license to access digital material, mostly I think journal articles, but also other things as well. So that's an example of that shift to digital purchasing.
Now, you'd mentioned this new movement about open access, where authors are not putting it through a journal, they're putting it out there. Is that something that your association of teachers, professors is pushing? Can you elaborate on that aspect?
Sure. This was a matter of some discussion within our membership, and there wasn't unanimity at first, but a consensus has developed in support of open access. And sort of the genesis of it was a realization that our members, paid for by Canadian taxpayers, were producing vast amounts of literature, journal articles, transferring that to private sector publishers for free, and often doing the editing and peer review work to ensure that it was up to scratch for free. And then purchasing it back at taxpayer expense for huge amounts of money. You think of wage increases, inflation, and then the skyrocketing cost of these journals was just off the charts.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so our folks have PhDs, there was a realization maybe this really isn't the best way to go about this.
So the present model was, we'll do all the work, we write it, we publish it, we even edit it, we give it to you, and then you charge us back for it.
Yeah,
And I don't make any money on it.
Yeah, and this light bulb came on that maybe.
So at first they had that discussion in your group, and they were not sure about this open access, but then they started, more and more people moved towards it because of this reality.
Yeah.
Mr. Gibbleson, you touched specifically on new ways. I think you talked about disruptive technologies and the way that what students see value or don't see value. Is this part of that movement? Are you seeing that? Is it flowing from the student's mindset about what's worth paying for or not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of this, we're looking at some very new learning tools or technologies where students are paying out of pocket, and they're nominal prices, like say $20 per half credit, for example. One example that comes to mind is learning catalytics, and it's similar to Cengage Learning, where the faculty member has access to the entire repertoire in the Pearson catalog, and students are paying $20 compared to like a $200 textbook, right? So I think this is where we are beginning to see the shifts in the way in which consumers, our students, value course material, and also understanding that it is for a single half credit course, and typically speaking, unless you're a professional, they tend not to hold on to them. So.
We've seen similar movements, say, with music, where at one point the younger generation was just saying, I have no issue with getting it for free, and music revenue was dropping. And then things like Spotify came on, and actually they've turned, and now people are saying, I'm willing to pay this monthly fee because it's a reasonable charge. Is that the same type of thing that we're going to see in the education? Is it happening? Are we going to see this?
Yeah, we're right at that tip right now, I believe. And, I should also state, it's not necessarily for this committee, but certainly for Canadian Heritage, that we are concerned about some of the emerging models, to protect student pocketbooks. One of them in particular is books in tuition. That being, books or digital course material that may be charged as an ancillary fee, where students don't have any option to go elsewhere to purchase that material. And so there is some real concern that ultimately we would see that bundled with tuition, and then we start to think about all the other policy changes that would have to take place at the federal level to accompany that. So that is a concern for us.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Lloyd. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my first question would be for Mr. Jones and Mr. Gilbertson. Something that sort of came out from the previous government in British Columbia was a little-known program called Creative Commons. And unfortunately, I never really had the opportunity to access that because it sort of came online just as I was graduating. But I was wondering if you could comment on the role of Creative Commons within the greater copyright issue.
Yeah, certainly. I think, so looking at British Columbia in particular, they started making investments in open educational resources that are tied to Creative Commons licensing. We've seen additional provinces, particularly Ontario more recently, which just came online with their open textbook catalog. And so, as they started to begin to target first and second year level high enrollment courses, we have started to see a shift away from traditional proprietary resources in that regard. Close copyright.
Just a quick note, I have a newspaper article here, BC to lead Canada in offering students free open textbooks. So it heralds that the program there to work on open education resources, and the date, interestingly, is October 16th, 2012. So we see things that have changed over the last 5 years, in this case the growth of open education resources, and we know that at individual universities this has saved students hundreds of thousands of dollars, and overall in British Columbia they're thinking $4 or $5 million in the last few years of having free, open, accessible online textbooks, replacing costly versions from private publishers.
Now, following up on this, do you view this as, I'm not aware, like how are first part of the question is how are the content creators compensated under the Creative Commons scheme? And also, with the answer to that, is this a cost-effective way to provide resources to students, but also to respect the rights of creators?
do you want to?
I'll speak to the compensation for some of the creators. These would be university professors, researchers, and they earn a salary every year, and part of their work would be considered producing this stuff.
So it's included in their salary. There's no, like when they put something on Creative Commons, they don't receive anything?
There would be a multiplicity of different versions, but sort of the core idea is that as part of their salary, university professors do this kind of writing, and they would volunteer to devote some of their time to these projects.
So is the government funding that's going into this, like that's not paying any of the creators, that's just basically for the setup of the programming and the providing of the program?
It is going to pay for some of the creation of course material, yeah.
So you would say then, to answer the question, that it is a cost-effective way of providing resource?
Yeah, and I suppose, you know, it depends on whose perspective, right? So I'm perhaps not going to comment on that today, but I do think that it is important that the committee review some of the recent developments in this space for the creation of open educational resources.
Thank you very much. All right. We're going to move to Mr. Longfield. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And a fast 3 minutes. I'm going to open up with Mr. Gilbertson. It was good to hear you mentioning Cengage, because I think that is one of the game changers that we're facing. The cost of books going into tuition is another model. As we look at possibly supporting tuition, we could also be supporting text at the same time. Two other pieces for me is the French language open access journals, the erudite journals, and also looking at the model of digital learning products tied to assessments that came up in conversations in Guelph as well. So there's policy needed around all of that. Could you comment on where the gaps that we could maybe be diving into in future discussions?
Yeah, so I think at the provincial level, we don't necessarily have specific pricing floors or limits, right. But I do think that that's something that will have to be explored at some point. Indexing to inflation. I probably can't speak to your first question on French language open access journals. I'm not a content expert in that field of study, but pass it over to Paul maybe.
Thank you.
I don't have an answer for that either, but I can commit to investigate that and find out, because that's something we will be able to put our fingers on.
Thank you, and I think it's important for Canada when we look at larger publishing houses out of the States supplying textbooks into Canada, that we still get access to Canadian content in both languages and as well as Canadian information that Canadian students need to get access to. The measure around protecting students' copyright over works. So students that are studying and contributing to creation of content, we're providing more money for students to be engaged in research, and whether there's some type of opportunity there for students to get relief on textbooks, or I'm not sure where I'm going with that. But the students are part of the equation on research, they're part of the equation on having to access information. And maybe this is back to Mr. Bayless's comment around creators just aren't getting paid for content. And really, a lot of them aren't motivated to be paid for content. They want to be published.
Yeah, I mean, I think what your point hits on is these are very disruptive times, and new methodologies, new approaches are being tried all the time. And that's what I guess we want to see coming out of this review, is that environment is protected, that ecosystem is protected when it's open access, open education resources, fair dealing, the knowledge networks, the site licenses, that the new approach is what's the way to go.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Genereux. You got 3 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, guys, for coming and being here today. Just one question for you. You've answered a lot of them, similar to the question I asked to Universities Canada prior in terms of the open access policy that stipulates reports from grant-funded research must be made freely available to the public within 12 months after publishing. I imagine it's mostly you, Mr. Jones. Welcome to weigh into it as well, Mr. Gilbertson, but your assessment of that policy.
Our organization supports open access and we support those policies, but we talked about the disruption and the dislocation that's caused. Moving to an open access system was something new for our members. It was something greeted with interest and some skepticism, and we, as it's developed, people are moving to it more and more. It's not without its problems. One is that the publishing systems are created sometimes by submission fees. So if you want to get an article published, it may cost you $500 or $1,000. And we're looking for ways to bring that out of the grant money that professors get and other sources, so that people in new scholars or people in areas where there's not a lot of grant support are still able to publish. So working well, we endorse and support it, but there are still some kinks to be worked out.
No. Okay. Do you think that should be expanded once again to all publicly funded research dollars?
I think the idea of making research knowledge that the public has paid for the creation of available as widely as possible is a goal we would support.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good. Thank you very much. And for the final 3 minutes of the day, Mr. Graham.
I want to keep going down the road Mr. Jenner is going down. You brought up Crown copyright earlier, Mr. Jones. I find this a fascinating topic that a lot of people have never heard of. And so I would go one step further and say, should publicly funded works be placed in the public domain?
Yes, that would be, I think, the ultimate goal, and that would be the direction that we would want to move towards. I know there are some areas where there are issues of confidentiality that may restrict that immediate flow. There are also areas where there is revenue derived from the commercial sale of some material, and maybe things have to be worked out before that is placed immediately into the public domain or Crown copyright is removed on those things. But overall, as a matter of principle, we would look towards moving away from Crown copyright. I know in the United States there's no equivalent of Crown copyright.
With what would you replace Crown copyright?
Nothing.
Just anything published by the government or under the auspices of the government would become public domain, or is that how you'd see it?
That would be the ultimate direction to go, with some steps along the way.
Okay. How do you compare Canadian fair dealing with American fair use?
My understanding is that fair use in the United States is actually a broader right than fair dealing in Canada, that it's not restricted by purpose, and that it has less limitations overall.
Okay. And you mentioned in your opening remarks that there's a specific clause that interferes with Indigenous rights. Can you tell me what clause that is?
I believe it's Section 18 of the current Act. At the time when the tapes were made decades and decades ago, it may have been a different section. And it is a right that I think in some instances makes a lot of sense. The recordist would own and control the things that they record. In this case, what it allowed was the appropriation of these stories, myths, legends from this community. And so in that case, it wasn't an appropriate application of that rule. So in terms of specific things to pinpoint where Indigenous concerns could be brought in, maybe it's that Section 18.
Okay. My final question is, for the record, and this is, is to be put on the record, what systems exist to oversee the proper use of fair dealing by professors, campus bookstores, and so forth? Or does it run entirely on the honor system? And that's for any of you. That question goes to all of you. So.
I can comment. So I do know that many institutions have set up copyright offices with expertise, and we heard Paul commenting on that earlier. And so even within our own institutions, and specifically campus stores, we adhere to what we call fair dealing guidelines that have been implemented at each of our respective campuses. We operate within the interpretation of the Act and fair dealing, and so relying on the guidance of Universities Canada is how we operate. So.
Sean, do you have any comments on that?
No, that's a good answer.
Right.
On that note,
thank you
very much, and thus ends our first day of the copyright study. I want to thank all of our panelists for coming today. We're going to suspend for a very quick 2 minutes. We have a few minutes that we need to do some committee business. Thank you.
you.